Okay. And I believe we are live. So, hi everyone, and welcome to Build a Better Knowledge Base. I'm Micah McGuire, Pro Writing Aid's B2B Digital Marketing Manager, and today I am joined by some very special panelists from Pro Writing Aid, our product strategist, AJ Ogilvy, and our head of client solutions and of support, Tom Wild. And we are delighted to have a couple of folks from the product team for Knowledge Base from live chat. Justina Janowska, who is the senior product growth designer and co-creator of Knowledge Base, and Jędrzej Bogatsky, who is the co-creator and full stack developer for Knowledge Base. So guys, it is great to have you with us. We have got a great session in store for you all. Please feel free to submit any questions that you have during the session just via the Q&A box. We're going to try to save a little bit of time for that, so please feel free to go ahead and submit those. Without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get started. So I think for our audience, the first thing we need to cover is what is the definition of a knowledge base? Because in a lot of customer support circles, there are a ton of different definitions that are thrown around. Is it something that is external and facing your customers? Is it internal documentation? Is it both? You know, where do we start with that definition? And Tom, could you kick us off?
Yes, thanks, Micah, and great to be here. And what a great recovery from the start of a Zoom call, right? Always interesting way to start a webinar. Keep us on our toes, but
always.
Yeah. So yeah, knowledge base. It's an interesting one, right? And I think it deserves some definition. It makes sense to most people. Most people have an understanding what knowledge base is, but I think when we're talking about customer service, it's got a particular it does a particular job, because in the past, you know, we've talked about FAQs, possibly from an external point of view, external user point of view, and an internal kind of just documentation. But really, a knowledge base, to my mind, kind of formalizes all this. And it's a place where at Pro Writing Aid, for example, we capture, we order, we update, we present knowledge, and that can be to our users. So our customers, our clients, whoever's using Pro Writing Aid, helps us deliver the knowledge they need to get the most out of the tool. But it's also an internal tool, and that's really critical. You know, particularly in a business like ours, it's fairly fast moving. There's lots of development going on all the time. So we capture the knowledge that you need to work in the department or to serve our customers in the best way possible. And all of that is kind of formalized under the knowledge base. So to answer your question, Micah, from our point of view, it's both internal, inward facing, and external. I think that's fairly kind of well received definition, if you like. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's got anything to add to that.
In kind of a way, it sounds like it's two sides of the same coin. Would anybody else like to add on to that definition? Justina, do you guys have a kind of a different definition whenever you're working with this stuff with your knowledge base product?
Well, actually, we do have a very similar division in our company, and this is what our product does. So it serves customers and teams, internal teams at the same time. But what I would add to this is that knowledge base is transitioning from like a plain documentation to something more of a living creature that is available in context, and we serve it in our chat widget. We serve it to chat agents during chat. So this is something more complex right now, and not just plain documentation, but like a living document that is where people that is available where people work and where people want it to be. So I will just add this to what Tom said.
Yeah, really, really good point. Living and breathing, we call it at Pro Writing Aid. You're absolutely right, Sina.
Alrighty. Well, I think we have solidly covered that definition. So we will go ahead and go on to the next question, which is around breaking down a knowledge base article, because that is such a huge task, especially if you are not a writer yourself or you don't have a lot of writers on your team. And a lot of it comes down to trying to stay clear and stay readable, and, you know, how on earth do you structure these articles, all of that. So how do you actually start breaking that down? And AJ, if you want to kick us off there.
Yeah, I also think that this discussion of knowledge base, having a knowledge base, also intersects with this larger trend of SaaS, software as service, and this idea of membership. And so, one of the things that's happened at the same time of the growth of software as service and also just a kind of membership approach is that customer success is such a big thing now, right? And we can kind of think about customer success as part customer support and part account management. But the point that I'm getting at is that what our relationship with the user doesn't end once they sign up, right? And what we really want to happen to a certain degree is for them to feel that they own and that they're a member of this of this product or of this group. And what that means is we're trying to help them, especially with Pro Writing Aid, not just fix their problems, but become develop mastery. So if you think about that, like how can we help people become develop mastery of Pro Writing Aid? Then you can think about these knowledge base articles not as like a kind of a one and done, but as a, hey, where does this article fit on the user journey? Like where might we find the user coming to this article at this particular time? So in a way, one thing to think about, when you're structuring these articles is not so much like how do we solve their problem, but where were they before this article? Like where were they on the journey? For Pro Writing Aid, it might be, have they just signed up? Did they just upload a document into the tool? And so that's one thing to think about. The other thing I think to think about is product voice and tone. So not just solving the problem, but really thinking about how can this article also convey the voice and tone of the organization. And then lastly, just really jargon free, really understanding that internally you might be using words or phrases. And I think this is another idea of using the user's language to try to understand, this article, to write this article.
Yeah, AJ, I just want to jump in there because I think that your first point is really particularly chimes with me right now when we're talking about almost it's kind of content design, right? It's not just as simple as writing. Going back to that point I made about FAQs, your job really was often just to write an answer to a presupposed question, right? But actually, it's much more about envisaging, like you say, the user journey. Where are they on that journey? And it's as much going into the kind of, when you're doing UX design, you need to think really clearly and carefully about that, where the user is in their journey, not only what the problem is they're trying to solve right now, but what's coming next and where they've come from to get to that point. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. And there's lots of skills that go into it, not least the actual writing of it, the jargon and the plain English and all that kind of stuff. But to me, that's the critical one.
Justina, Yunze, was there anything that you guys found out whenever you guys were kind of doing user research and things like that would help out with this process? Are there mindsets that maybe our watchers need to consider here?
Well, one interesting thing for me during the research was that some of our customers are not speaking English, so they are using Chrome extension to translate knowledge bases. So I think it's really important to keep sentences short and keep the grammar structure really clear and simple so that it's easy to translate by machine learning and Google Translate. So this is interesting. And I think we should keep it in mind that not all people speak our language.
Exactly. And that's really a fascinating AI application. And it's funny that you said that the grammar structure could make such a difference in kind of the AI's ability to translate and everything else. Yinje, anything you'd like to add on to that?
I think that a good article is helping the customer to see through the problem and don't block them on the way to see the solution, and keeping the language simple, and trying to be in the customer's shoes, so you don't use technical jargon. Just like AJ said, we need to be very clear. We are cursed with knowledge, as I may say that. We know our products the best, and we probably are, because of that, we are not the best people to describe how things work. So getting a second help from someone who is not so tight with the product could be a great idea to break down some complex problems into smaller pieces, which can be easier to understand.
And that actually brings us to a really good point about that curse of knowledge, because we often have kind of our own jargon for speaking about our product that sometimes does not translate to the customer. I know we've kind of seen this at Pro Writing Aid, that different features, we may have a different name than our customers do. And it really starts coming down to, how do you start filling in the gaps in your knowledge base articles so that that kind of language is used? And NJ, I think your product has a great feature that shows failed searches, right? So users can we can actually take a look and see how users are searching for certain queries and kind of learn what their language is like in comparison to ours, right?
Yeah, exactly. We found out during our time using our product that people are sometimes they define features or set of features kind of differently than we would. So it helped us to add new context to the articles, so people can find the answers they need. So but it's not only about our product. Everyone should try to measure things like failed searches and in general customer feedback on the articles, because when the article is not helpful, people should be able to leave feedback on that, and that's also a thing that our product provides out of the box. If you want, I can show you a quick demo of how that works.
Yeah, please go right ahead. I'm sure our watchers would love to see it.
All right. So here we have knowledge base with insight sections, and we can see the most viewed articles. And also we see that this article should be improved because it has a rating of 0%, 2 bad rates, and also failed searches show that people looked for canceling account, but they didn't get any article on that. So I think that this should be a starting point for doing such a research on your customers' behavior and their what they desire to obtain from knowledge base.
And that system for kind of finding out your ratings on improving articles, that's a kind of thumbs up, thumbs down system, right?
Yes, exactly. This is the article I was talking about, which should be corrected. And if we refresh the page, we can see that we can add thumbs up and thumbs down on the article. So I can say that it was much more helpful for me, and that's another piece of feedback. Great piece of feedback for the end user that is doing the knowledge base.
And ultimately, what I think this kind of leads back to is making sure that your tools are in the right place. So you want to make sure that these kinds of features are available with your current knowledge base tool, or if you're looking at swapping to a new vendor, or it's your first time and you're actually looking at starting a knowledge base for the first time, it's worthwhile to check out these features and make sure that you have these feature sets available. So NJ, that is very, very helpful.
I would also like to add that if you have some kind of self-hosted knowledge base, you can easily add this kind of insights by using Google Analytics events. You don't have to bring a whole software just to measure these kind of small things. You can start very small, and then as you need, grow to other products or to other solutions. So you're not tied to any SaaS solution. You can just do it by yourself.
And I think part of this discussion also ends up having built in some talk about keeping things updated, because, you know, going in and trying to fill in these gaps and trying to change up articles as you're getting feedback, that takes a whole lot of work. How on earth do you keep that workflow in place? You know, Tom, you know, is there best practices that you've found?
Yeah, well, I can only speak from my experience at ProWriting Aid. We've got a kind of small but very dedicated support team at ProWriting Aid. It's something we've really worked on over the last, I'll say the last 12 to 18 months, particularly, Micah, as we've grown the team and tried to improve our kind of processes and things like our knowledge base. And this comes back, to my mind, to Yasina's point, which is about it being a living and breathing product. Okay, this is not a static document, but it's also a great way to kind of empower and motivate your teams, because what we do is we build a kind of review process into our weekly and monthly reviews and meetings. So we're constantly not only looking at the analytics, but just reviewing the content our own to make sure everything's up to date. So we kind of have this constant cycle of review just to make sure that, yeah, everything's kind of fit for purpose. I think there's another side of it, which is, you know, if you take a product like ProWriting Aid, so we are a SaaS product. We have several different integrations. We are constantly releasing new features and new updates. And so there's a really important part there that's just making sure we're constantly, you know, we're up to date. We've got the documentation to support those new features. And I know this is something we've talked about before with guys from live chat. It's a really important part of it, but really it comes back down to the fact that this is, you know, on a constantly rolling review, and giving the team the responsibility means they feel they're kind of in charge and they're managing it, and they're, you know, they're motivated by that. That's how we handle it at ProWriting Aid.
Yes, Tina, I think we had talked a little bit about what live chat's workflow looks like, especially kind of from a design and a customer journey standpoint too. You guys have actually somebody that basically is kind of responsible for updating your knowledge base articles, right?
I'm muted. Yeah, so it's sort of a content owner, but we call her a customer education specialist. And she's a dedicated person who is maintaining the content and writing new content, but she's not working solo. It's actually a team effort as well, because she works closely with a variety of teams, from support to sales and marketing team, because everyone knows something and has insight that's valuable for her work. So, for example, support team is closest to our customers, so they know what problems customers face, and then technical team can help with writing troubleshooting articles. Marketing can help with formatting, making it look good, and with SEO. And yeah, so it's actually everyone's responsibility, but there is one person who is on top of that, and she made this process. She worked on it to be a required step in our release process. So right now, each time any team builds something, they need to let her know. So there are resources to update and write new content. So this is how it works. And it works pretty well, actually.
That's a really smart way of doing it, especially because it keeps both your customer education specialist and your support team kind of out of that silo. Because AJ, I think we talked a lot about this with Emily Kinzig at our webinar earlier in the month.
Yeah, I think this is critical. This idea that I do user research at ProWriting, but I often feel that the customer support team knows far more about our users than I do, because they're just constantly, really interfacing with them all the time. And I think the idea of and I think the other thing is not just sort of like bringing in customer support on a reactive basis, but like as a foregrounding their role in every discussion about anything. Even Tom talked a lot about product features coming out, and I think that customer support probably needs to be involved in that. Any new rollout of any feature should hey, let us know that this is coming out, or what does it look like. And so I think it's really key, that sense of integration.
And I think to a certain extent too, especially if you are, say, dealing with a remote team like we're remote, that can be kind of tricky to pull off. And Tom, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about how we kind of keep the channels of communication open at ProWriting Aid?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I joined ProWriting Aid 2 years ago, and I've worked kind of remotely before, but not in an entirely remote business. Which ProWriting Aid is. So I think we've just hit kind of 50 employees now, and we are covering a huge number of countries, and we don't have a single office. So we pay a lot of attention to kind of communication, both formal and informal, like how we do that. We use Slack, like many organizations do. We encourage various types of meetings, not only kind of weekly meetings, but informal meetings between those as well. But it's critical that you have the buy-in from the team. You've got everybody kind of understands what you're trying to do, the mission you're trying to deliver, and your kind of roadmap for that particular year or however long, and that they're in it together. But it's really, to me, it's communication is absolutely critical, Micah. It's not without its challenges, but it can, it does. To me, it just has. It means we've got a really rich, really diverse team, some fascinating, fantastic skills in there that mean we can actually deliver a better service to the customer as well.
And Justina, Yunje, I think part of that kind of ties in with your product having the ability to let anyone edit, right? So that way everyone can kind of pop in and out of the product as they need to. So I can imagine that would help speed up kind of the update workflow and everything. Have you guys kind of found that makes life easier on everyone?
Yeah, but I think that we should also provide templates that will make this process even easier and more consistent and true to our voice and tone, so that every time we write an article, it sounds like live chat. So it helps a lot to have templates available for people.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
I just wanted to add that we also have content review at live chat. So each piece of content that we produce has to be checked by someone else. So there is no strict guide that someone has to give a thumbs up on some content. But in general, we do not deploy new piece of content without grabbing a second person opinion. Mm-hmm. That's also important on keeping consistent voice and tone in our communication.
And that actually kind of ties into my next question, which is on, if you are a brand new team, you don't have any data to pull from, you don't have a current knowledge base, maybe you guys have developed a few FAQs, maybe you have those on your site. How on earth does a new team get started with building these bases? And Yunje, I think you had a great point on kind of using that as internal documentation first, right?
Yes. What we found out that worked for us was to create documents internally, which are used during chats, during answering tickets, and getting feedback from the customer service team on how these documents are structured and if whether they are helpful or not. So after some time, we found out that issues that customers have are more complex than we initially thought. So we expanded the articles and decided that this is the time we want to publish them. But at first, we really tried to keep it private, to also be able to help customer in case the article is not that helpful. As we said earlier, we know our products better than anyone else, and we might encounter some problems when explaining complex topics. So running it through real customers, but on chat during hands-on session is a good way to validate if the steps are any good for the. I think that also working with your support team and getting feedback from everyone on the board is good starting point for a larger knowledge base. So this is not only a simple FAQ. So you have 1, 2 answers. Knowledge base are very complex articles, piece of content that explain some very complex integrations, some troubleshooting. Your mileage may vary, but it definitely helps to go internally first.
Yeah. And I think it also tied into that is kind of the organization of your base and everything else, because I think a lot of companies get tied down to, do we put this as part of our knowledge base? Do we end up putting this on a blog article? Where do we count all of this stuff? And I think, it's interesting to me that in your knowledge base product, basically there's that ability to kind of categorize articles that I can imagine, people getting a lot of use out of saying, we could put this as kind of a from the blog excerpt or, related by subject matter, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's also very important to keep in mind that since the content is very complex, there can be few hundred articles. Currently at LiveChat, we have several hundred pieces of content on various topics, including integrations, billing issues, canceling your account, and it all has its place in our knowledge base. So it's easier to explore. Even if you don't know how to ask the question, the search is not producing any relevant results, you can still explore and find the answer you need if the categorization is like not when you've thought about how to categorize it, like it's not bad.
Right. And I think that also ties into kind of customer experience, which Justina, I think you know a lot about as the growth designer, right?
Yes, thank you. I think I do actually. And to me, knowledge base is an opportunity to provide great customer experience because you are able to help customers when they need it. And it all boils down to making the process very intuitive and as easy as possible. And intuitive to me means predictable. So when we started, we actually looked at other knowledge bases to see how it looks like, to make it similar to previous experiences people had with other knowledge bases, with other products. And it really means placing your search bar in the initial very like center position, having it on every page and making it work impeccably. So the search is the most important thing. What Jędrzej said about categorization, it's also very important to make it easy to find content and to navigate it. I would suggest using breadcrumbs. I think they're easy to go back and forth, and while reading content, it's really useful. Also, linking to other articles is useful as far as like going deeper in the content is concerned. So yeah, good navigation, working search bar. Then it needs to be accessible, which means it has to be easy to find. And apart from linking to your knowledge base from your main page, you also should analyze the journey, as Tom said, and think about places where customers may need answers. So we, as I said before, we placed it in our chat widget because we got feedback from our customers that they would like to offer help before starting a chat so that they can minimize the customer support workload. And it's really usable and works great. So I would add to that it needs to be customizable and like have the look and feel of your brand so that people feel good in there and feel familiar. So I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a ton of sense. And it was interesting, one of the points that you kind of kicked off on talking about making sure that it's sort of familiar, because we get into sometimes these radically different interfaces, and once you don't know what's going on, I think it kind of maybe freaks users out just a little bit. One of the points that I wanted to touch on, though, was you had mentioned linking to different articles and things like that. What is kind of the thought process when you're thinking about, what could we link to in our knowledge base as far as having those internal links? Is there anything that you guys have as far as the process for determining that? Do you guys sit down and say, we need to look at our anchor text and find, other articles that might match that anchor text? Or, what's kind of the thought process there?
Well, I would say that if there are many hits on one article or people are searching similar searches, it means that maybe you should break your huge article into smaller ones and then make it like a step-by-step process so that people just consume smaller chunks of content. So I will maybe start there. And then if there are, for example, things that we feel that people should do next based on analyzing customer journey, then it's also a good place to link those articles. It's good, for example, in onboarding articles when we know that next steps people should take to know the value of your product. So this is a good example, I think.
All about making it easy and basically breaking things down in their base components so customers don't have to wade through long articles. I mean, we all hate the too long didn't read articles, right? So that also kind of goes on to my next question, which AJ, I think you're kind of an expert on this. Reader-centric writing, because that is something that we have got to have in mind whenever we're creating these articles. And Justina, I think, touched on it earlier by saying, you've got to put yourself in your customer's shoes. What do we do to keep that in mind, to keep things clear and keep things readable?
Sure. So, some of these ideas that I'll bring up in terms of being reader-centric, many people have probably heard. One super simple thing that I think a lot of us, even I, forget is just to use the word "you," right? This idea that rather than talk in sort of an abstract way, the tool can do this or the tool can do that, but to say like, you're able to do X because our tool does Y, or you might be looking for X. So that's one thing of this idea of using you. Another idea is to just think about empathy a little bit, and I think every organization will have to figure out what that would look like and sound like based off their product voice and tone. But empathy, I think, goes what it would look like in one of these articles is just first like sort of acknowledging maybe what's going on, right? That, you know, saying navigating X or this or that, it can be pretty tough, you know, and just like, you know, kind of thinking again, empathy is just about like, I think this also goes to the user journey as well, kind of trying to understand how they might have found themselves here. The other thing too is we talk a lot about plain language, and you know, there's a whole movement, there's a whole kind of framework around plain language. Short sentences, right? Most great sentences are shorter than 20 sentences, 20 words. Short paragraphs too, chunking information rather than long paragraphs. So most paragraphs should probably be under 4 to 5 sentences. And this just makes things readable. The other thing is, I think we all know this as well, is that we have a cognitive trick. When an article pops up on our screen, we subconsciously are determining whether or not, or making a decision whether or not we're going to read it based on how visually readable it looks, right? So 6 paragraphs that are each 6 to 8 sentences long, people might just immediately say, I don't want to read that even before they've read a word. So what if you chunk it? What if you have bullet points? What if you know, use you? These are all little things that create, you know, that increase the likelihood that people are going to actually read what you're writing. I see Tom nodding. I know I'd love to hear what Tom's take is.
Yeah, obviously I'm nodding along. I mean, I've worked in kind of, we're kind of improving communication for years, and concur with absolutely everything AJ says. And a lot of it to me comes back to the point, I think Yenche that made it about, you know, it's very easy to get caught up in the fact that we technically understand what we're talking about 9 times out of 10, but our users don't. Not only that, quite often we might be bored talking about what we understand, right? It makes perfect sense to us. And so we don't think about who it is we're writing for. And AJ brings up some brilliant points, right, about, you know, short sentences and plain English. And what some of the ones I use, I have this thing in my head where I always say it's OSOI, 1 sentence, 1 idea, right? So if you've got more than 1 idea in a sentence, it shouldn't be 1 sentence. You should be splitting that sentence. So we know sentence length is a good measure, but that's equally a good thing to just keep in mind. Look at your sentences. What are you trying to get across? So yeah, there's lots of things. Now, I always, when it comes to putting yourself in the shoes of the reader, I always think about what is it that frustrates me the most. And I think to particular cloud providers, FAQ and knowledge base articles that I read on a weekly basis, and the amount of text that I'm faced with on a screen, and my heart just dies. It really does. I'm just like, I know the information is here somewhere. How the heck am I going to find it, right? And so I always think, well, there's an example of what I don't want to do. So we can think of plenty of ways we shouldn't be communicating. So it's not too hard to come up with ways that we should be getting better. But obviously within Pro Writing Aid, we've got a heap of tools that help with this as well. And have we got time for me to show it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just about to start leading into kind of showing our audience what these tools actually look like in action, both for Pro Writing Aid and for Knowledge Base.
Sure. Should we do Knowledge Base first and then come back to Pro Writing Aid? I'm easy.
Yeah. Yenche?
All right. I will just start the session. Okay, so knowledge base is aimed to be very simple to use. We wanted to put the most important thing, the content, first. So there is only a list of articles and topics on the main screen. We also provide information on article helpfulness, and from there you can just enter the article and edit it. Also, it seems that we are working with Pro Writing Aid extensions, so you can edit your while you edit your articles, you can also see what might be improved in terms of language. So it's added benefit of
And
having hosted solution. You can categorize your articles into topics. There are 3 states of the article. There is a public, internal, and draft. In general, the public article is visible to everyone on the internet. The internal is for your team eyes only. There is these are the articles that you want some very specific solutions that you don't want to put out there for everyone to see. Maybe some coupon codes. You can add the article, which can then be viewed during the chat session. This is how it looks like in live chat application, where the internal articles are helpful. In terms of public articles, we have the Public Help Center, which allows you to showcase any content you have. People can search for the article. There is a spell checker. So if you have some typo, it still finds the right content. And there is no much more to it. This tool aims to help you build your content. We are listening actively to our customers' feedback on what to improve, what is bad, what is good. So that's probably it from our side. Thank you.
And Yinje, could you bring up the editor just very quickly for us? Because I think it's great
Sure.
to see that everything is kind of working together right now. If we could maybe look at one of our long articles, because I think you had a couple of pro writing aid suggestions there.
Oh, sure.
Just wanted to show our viewers that what is going on here is this is actually one of our browser extensions at work within a rich text editor. So basically this gives you the ability that within any rich text field, you have that ability to edit. So you can see some of the suggestions here. Yinje, if you'd like to mouse over any of them, you just have these kinds of suggestions pop up. So in some cases, it would be grammar and spelling. In others, it is style. But I think, Tom, we can probably lead a little bit on showing the larger editor as well. So if you download any of our browser extensions, this is what you'll kind of see as our real-time editor. And then you have the ability to get into the full editor by clicking down there. See? And Tom, why don't we show the viewers just a little bit about the full product?
Yeah, totally. Let me just share my screen. I've got to say, I've been using live chat a lot recently, and I love, Yinje, what you said is so true. It's so simple to use. And this comes back to that point I was saying, Mike, about kind of getting the team involved, right? And getting everyone kind of empowered and motivated. It's so simple to get everybody on your team using it and producing the content. Obviously, you need to regulate it and make sure that it's hitting the right standards, but I think that's a great way of getting that kind of collaborative environment in your team. So what I've got here is kind of one of our help articles, open, just created it in live chat as an article. So you can see exactly what Yinje has just shown us. And here I've got, some of those underlines that we just talked about. If I mouse over, you can see the suggestions for what I'm doing wrong. This is my Achilles heel, right? Integrations, I always misspell it. So it's a really simple fix. Just click and make the change. Passive verbs, pet hate of mine, pet hate of most people in business, to be honest, right? There's nothing technically wrong with a passive voice, but your readers, it's causing them less kind of cognitive work if they're actually written in the way you expect to see a sentence presented. So we convert passive into active. So you can do all of this just with the Chrome extension enabled up here, right? If you want to go further, by clicking on the little Pro Writing Aid symbol here, it, like you saw, it opens the full editor. And in the editor, you can run, in fact, let me shut that down. I'm just going to open the editor from the full article. So here you can see the full article. Now it does strip all the formatting out, but as soon as you close this down, it will it'll take you back into the interface you were using. All the formatting, all the images, everything else will be preserved. So you can see again, this is just showing the real-time results. So same thing, I'm mouse over each of these points. I can just make the change and move on. But if I want to do a more detailed look, I can run any of these reports. And I'm not going to spend a long time, but a great place to start is a summary report, because this looks at how your document is doing in terms of the metrics you should be hitting. So this is scoring things on, like, on style, on readability grade, where, you know, how readable is your document? And within the summary report, if I click on the readability report, it'll show me a breakdown of my paragraph or my document paragraph by paragraph. How easy to read is each paragraph? And you can see I've got a few slightly difficult to read ones there. So I'm immediately getting an idea of which other reports I want to run. Okay, so back to the, in fact, sorry, I should have closed that down. I've just, give me a second. There we go. Right, so out of the summary report, and I'm actually going to run the readability report to show you that. So here you can see I've got 0 very difficult to read paragraphs, but I've got 2 slightly difficult to read paragraphs, and here's one of those. Okay, I've got a flesh reading use score of 54.7. That's not high enough. That means it could cause my readers some issues when they're trying to get to the end of the paragraph. So what I need to do is just make some changes, just edit that down, like I said, into shorter sentences, maybe simplify the vocabulary, then run the report again and see how you're doing, seeing if you're starting to hit that target. If I want to go deeper into style and grammar, they're both here. This is going to show you some of the results you saw in the real-time checker. You know, unusual capitalization, I've got spelling issues, I've got grammar issues listed here. And then I think we've got time just to dive into one more, which is one of my favorites, is the all repeats. So the all repeats, don't worry too much about the color here, but we as humans, we're pretty bad, right, in using vocabulary. We tend to rely on the same words time and again. And AI is particularly good, computers are particularly good at spotting patterns. So this is where one of the areas where a tool comes into its own. It really easily analyzes where you're overusing multi-word phrases. So I can see here that I'm using the word things like the phrase like add in 5 times, I'm using you can 4 times. That's not too bad, but you can imagine if that comes in a short document into double figures, that's really starting to bore my reader. Chances are I'm starting to lose their attention. I can even see which single words I'm using the most. So again, when you're looking at longer documents, and particularly ones that probably are not being particularly well planned, you'll find that you're repeating yourself a lot. So this is a great way of spotting which words you should be changing, which words you should be editing. And you can see as I hover over any of these, it comes up with alternative words. I mean, that's a really quick snapshot view, Mike. I don't know if there's any other particular reports you thought might be worthwhile showing.
I think we probably covered it. You know, I think we just wanted to give everyone a quick view of how these things can ultimately, how these tools can help you with these knowledge bases and make life a little bit easier. Basically, if anyone has any Q&A questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat or the comments. In the meantime, guys, any kind of last words of advice for support teams who are, you know, kind of working on this journey? Maybe they're brand new to it. Maybe they're basically kind of looking back and editing a base that they currently have. You know, anything that you guys want to share with our watchers?
I would say to start as soon as possible and then iterate from there, and it will just come easily from that would be my advice. And to analyze your data and see what your customers need and what they're looking for. So that will be a great start to build like a FAQ and then build up from there.
Yes, exactly what Justina said about doing research and listening to the customers. We at Live Chat, we actually read the chats that our support team had with our customers to gather feedback on some of the features or some of the problems that they encounter. So we also have support shifts that we are supposed to attend once a few weeks, so we can also get into customers' mind to see how they, what problems they have, and what can we do to solve them. So it's in general, it's customer-centric the software development, I guess, in our case.
Yeah.
It all comes back to knowing your user.
Yeah, totally. I just want to add to that, Micah, because we still have a long, a journey ahead of us at Pro Writing Aid, and talking to Asina and Yenjay from Live Chat, I find it really exciting actually, because I realize, what more we can do. But it is all, for me, it's all in the data. It's all in the research. It's the kind of stuff that AJ's doing in kind of user interviews. It's the stuff that we gather from users every day, just in the way they ask questions, the tone they're using, the problems they're coming across. And we don't analyze that enough. We've still got more we can do on that, but we've learned so much in the last year by just scratching the surface there and getting into it. But yeah, for me, it's all about data.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I would say too is how might the knowledge base be framed as an invitation to participate to the user, right? Rather than a kind of unidirectional, here's information, more like how might it be an invitation to collaborate and have users feel some ownership over the knowledge too, which isn't easy, but that's one thing I think a lot about. So
Absolutely, just that opportunity to interact and give them a chance to get to know your product. So we go from kind of that activation where they're just using the product to kind of that, phase where it's the tool they can't live without, So guys, that was a fantastic session. Thank you all for joining us. To all of our watchers, thank you for joining us. We will have this live stream replay up on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube through the weekend. But if you would like a copy prior to that you can keep and rewatch before after Monday of next week, then please feel free to shoot us an email at hello, HELLO, prowritingaid.com. Just throw that you'd like a replay of the Build a Better Knowledge Base in the subject line, and we will make sure to get you one. For our Zoom watchers, you will have a replay in your inbox tomorrow. Thank you all again for attending, and have a great day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.
Thanks all.
thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.